Going to meet me. I mean, every time I get on an airplane, I'm like, this could be the day. This could be the day. And the plane always lands safely. And I'm like, I don't know why I get annoyed by this. I should probably stop getting annoyed by the airplane because it never crashes. I keep waiting for it to crash.
Today, our friend M said that, Dale, you think about death a lot.
I know.
And then you were like, thank you. You think it's a total compliment. She was like, Welcome to our back porch. Pull up a seat and listen in to an unscripted, unedited conversation between two seminary-trained published authors who have been married 20 years and still love talking together. We have been on the road for a couple weeks now. We're recording this episode from an Airstream on the property of our friends living in Durango, Colorado. And we can hear the wind outside, and we're surrounded by beautiful forest and mountains, and that's an appropriate setting for the beauty and the meaningful conversations we like to have on our back porch. Mm-hmm. We've been on the road a lot, but I believe you had a chance to teach the boys the Bible last week when we were in South Carolina.
Still teaching them. I was just looking at my little my album of all my recordings, because I record all my stories, and I've done 4 or 5 since we've been on the road, which is wow. Pretty good.
That's impressive because so much is shaken up right now.
Oh my goodness, the routine is all out of whack.
Mm-hmm.
But it's good because they're learning. Like we often say, we're always doing schooling, we're always educating, but sometimes we have classroom time.
That's right.
And so we're definitely educating as we go. It's awesome. I mean, the boys they have a trampoline out here. They're jumping in the yard. They're walking around the property. They're looking at the different kinds of wildlife and trees. We had deer walking by just yesterday. Our youngest is out taking the chickens out, putting them back, checking on their eggs throughout the day. He's become a little chicken farmer. It's fantastic.
It really is. We're going to be taking them to Mesa Verde, and they're going to get to see the old Native American ruins of the caves that were carved into the rock there.
Their homes carved in the rock.
Yeah, we're going to see ice caves on Tuesday.
Can't wait to see all this.
Lots of things. We've been visiting the Andy Griffith Museum in North Carolina and the Museum of Geosciences at Virginia Tech. Try to keep a lookout for protesters, but we just saw a very contented, normal-looking college student, so that was nice.
That's right. I was impressed on Virginia Tech that as I was walking across almost the whole campus, because I had to park so far away since I had a trailer, how few of them actually had their nose in their phone. Most of them just walked with their head up, just walking around from class to class, wherever it is they were going. I'm sure there's no rule at Virginia Tech that you can't be on your cell phones while you're walking. So I commend them, because we are in a society now where having your nose in your phone is the way things ought to be.
This week has been great for me to make some new goals for my paintings. I'm working on a painting today of Key West.
The southernmost point. Right?
Yep. Yeah, that was really fun to work on. Tonight we want to talk about a question that came through from a longtime friend of ours who is facing cancer through someone she knows and loves, and helping this family member fight a really gruesome form of cancer. Those were her words. And she talked about the real option we have to decide if we are going to do chemotherapy or if we're going to do this is time to let cancer take its course and say goodbye and walk into the embrace of God. And, Dale and I do not have cancer, but we know as we get older, more and more of our friends are facing this terrible sickness, terrible disease. And because in our early years of marriage, we watched Dale's mom, Lois Ann Fincher, fight and then die from cancer. This is something that Dale has thought of, this question of how do you know how long to fight? How do you know how many chemotherapies to do? How do you know when you're done? And what is the right path to take? This is a question Dale said we should talk about that at Back Porch. And our friend actually said this might be a good conversation too. So that is our topic. A heavy topic, but one that's really important to think about. Especially as many of us are friends to or know those who are fighting cancer.
Or any terminal diagnosis.
Yes. Yes.
It's always hard because there's no one answer for everybody.
Yeah.
And there's, different perspectives to have on a variety of things. For example, death is a scary thing. It is something we do alone. You don't hold somebody's hand and they die at the same time with you as you go into the unknown. And even if they did, their soul and your soul are both in the hands of God, and they fly to wherever they fly. I don't understand how all of that works. But you do it alone, and it is you and God alone, which for many is absolutely terrifying. And I think for the reality of it is that our own mortality is an opportunity to purify us and to accept our limitations. I think it's one thing that we don't talk about enough. People think it's morbid. We were even joking about it today. How often we talk or don't talk about death. I think it was Joseph Bailey who said, in modern society, we're as hush-hush about death as the Victorians were about sex. And it is like the taboo thing. We like to think that we're more resilient than we are as we fill ourselves with endless distractions and consumptions and appetites. But it's thinking of your mortality before you have a terrible sickness is a wonderful thing, so that when the terrible sickness comes, whatever it may be, and it may be a car accident, it may be old age, it may be just your heart stopping in your sleep, whatever it is, you're ready because you allowed the prospect and understanding of your own mortality to purify you and to be ready for it, because it puts in a really big, sharp relief what really matters in this world. What matters to us? Is it having the cool car? Is it the ambitions for a bigger house? Is it the ambitions for your company? Is it having another party? Is it going fishing again? Is it seeing your kids grow up? Is it finally reaching that retirement? We have all these different goals, but God wants to ground us in the deep and meaningful things of who He is and what our purpose in life is, to reflect who He is and to have joy and relish what it means to be alive and to prepare for a living for 1,000,000 years. So to me, death is, and thinking about it, is a wonderful opportunity to say, I want to start my life of 1,000,000 years now. I want to start doing now what I plan to do after I die, which is living a good life, learning to enjoy beauty and goodness, learning to tell the truth to myself and stop being afraid of it, to practice intimacy and be close to the people that are around you, to learn the art of reconciliation when possible, to have more patience than we probably have, to cultivate a long obedience in the same direction, the incremental growth that we don't ever think we're going to arrive at some sort of good maturity, but if we take the steps every day towards that direction, before you know it, we'll walk into it and not even know that we arrived. Those are wonderful things. So when death comes along, or the prospect of it, I think the blow is softened. We're like, oh, it's time. Now it is upon me. How is it going to keep shaping me? I mean, I don't want to monologue on and on about this, but
I don't find you monologuing. I think all the... Go ahead, please finish.
Well, I remember, for my mom, when my mom was not an emotionally nurturing person, and that was, a hard thing growing up, not realizing that there was some sort of deficit in your life. I mean, I had all sorts of deficits. The nurturing in my childhood and growing up were pretty
measly.
Yeah. And if somebody were to look at my childhood from the outside, you'd be like, wow, that's cool. You got to travel, you did not want for food, and got good grades. I got to go to a Christian school. So a lot of those needs were provided for, but it was measly on the things that, some of the things that matter most, like knowing how much you're loved and accepted. But when you grow up with family members and parents who don't know that they themselves are loved and accepted, then they just continue to transfer that on to the next generation. They're dealing with their own stuff. But when my mom was diagnosed with cancer, which interestingly is, she's only 2 years older than I am now.
Wow.
It was a shocking thing for all of us. But that's when my mom, in many ways, my mom was already, she was so committed to God and faithful to Him. She was a remarkable person in that regard. But her emotional life was immature, and she feared intimacy, and she struggled with acceptance. She always looking for approval from often just yucky sources. But when the cancer came in, and she started facing her own mortality and learning some tools, I won't get into all the different details, but she started learning some tools of what it meant to be a healthier person, and she became fearless. And I think because she faced the fear of death, she became fearless in how she was going to finish out her life. And that to me was the most remarkable thing about her story, was really her last 9 years. She was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer, and she went through 11 chemotherapy treatments until she just couldn't do anymore. She just said chemotherapy is sometimes worse than just dying. It's the cure that's worse than the disease, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But it purified her soul, and she did become fearless. And I think that was a wonderful gift that the prospect of her mortality gave her. And because if you knew you were going to die sometime in the near future, what would you do in your life to change it? You know, people often ask that silly question of, like, if you were going to die in a week, what would you do? And for some reason, everybody pulls out their bucket list. I want to go see the Grand Canyon, or I want to put my toes in the Pacific Ocean, or I always wanted to go skydiving, or whatever the thing may be. But to be able to say, I actually want to tell the truth to my family members. I actually want to confess my sins. Or I want to tell other people not to waste time on the frivolous nonsense, and not even worry if people like me or not. I'm just going to invite them right into it. So, like we would sit together with my mom, and she goes, well, there's 4 defects of character. This is the classic one we always share. Selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and one other, fear, I think. And she said, okay, so mine are, and she would rattle them off, and then she would stop. I mean, you're not even asking her to have this conversation. She just starts saying it to you while you're in the middle of who knows what you're talking about. And after she gets done talking about what her defects of character are, she turns and says, now what are yours? And I remember when she first started having those conversations, it was both very sobering, because those are questions I hadn't asked myself. But they were also very liberating, because I knew that if I could be honest about these things, then it was going to unlock things in me that needed to be unlocked. Freedom is my favorite thing, so I wanted to be free. So that was a wonderful part of her legacy, and if it was only the prospect of, I think, of her mortality, of her death, that let her be open to it and fearless in it. So that was wonderful. It's a great thing to think about if I only had 1 week to live.
It is.
What would I do with this one wild and precious life, as Mary Oliver says? How would I come clean? I mean, think about all the things you would do today if you weren't afraid. What would you do today if you had nothing to hide? We'd be more angry at the right things. My mom went through a huge spell of being angry at things. Angry and crying and angry and crying. I remember one time I came home from college, and she was just, the whole week, she was just angry and crying and angry and crying about stuff. It was like all this poison that was pent up over decades was all coming out. Why do they treat me like that? Why couldn't I ever get their approval? Why is this? Why is that? Why? That was wrong when they did that, and it was wrong when that happened, and I'm trying to get my dad to say he loves me, and he thinks I'm weird because I'm asking for it. Now that I'm, 60 years old, why is she not, why is I still struggle with that? And that was all fascinating stuff. Like, wow, she's confessing the family sins. Good for her. But it was revolutionary for the rest of us.
It was shocking, too. It was not exactly what you wanted to come home from college to.
I couldn't handle it. It's hard to handle when it's your mom doing it.
Yeah.
Because it's not the role you're supposed to play in your mom's life. Because, you know, my mom was divorced. My dad left when I was 6. And I was raised by my mom. And, but yeah, that's not a role that I ever played, and I never felt comfortable playing the person to lean on. But during some of that season, you know, she had very few people to lean on. And I think sometimes, I'm sure that if I wasn't there, she would have been doing the exact same thing.
Yes.
Crying and being angry. I wouldn't have been around to listen
I think you're just witnessing something that would have happened regardless.
Yeah.
And I think that that was something remarkable about your mother, is she did not care what people thought about her in those years. And that's the only way I knew her. I remember we went out to Red Lobster, and they were like, the server came over and was like, "Hi, I'm Joe, and I'm going to be your server tonight. And what's your name? Let me write it down." He wrote Joe on the...
Yes, I was at Macaroni Grill, where they really like to write your names down on the... And
then asked your mom, "And what's your name, ma'am?" And she said, "You don't need to know my name." And he was so...
And I'm like, how refreshing. You don't have to tell the waiter your name. He doesn't have to write it down on the placemat. It was so awesome. And you don't need to know my name.
And she had a wig that she would wear because the chemotherapy had taken all her hair, and she would go traveling. Well, she lived in Clearwater, Florida, so it was very hot, and she would go traveling, and sometimes she would just get so hot on those bus rides with the big tour buses going on some big trip.
Or wherever she was. She would just whip it off.
Whip off her
wig. It would be shocking to the people around her. Be like, the lady had hair a second ago, now she has no hair. I mean, how many, like, straight bald ladies do you see?
And she would
she'd like rub her head. Oh my gosh. Fearless.
I remember her sitting on the top of the catamaran that we took out to Stingray City, and sitting cross-legged and swinging her foot, talking about all the stingrays we were going to see, and then all the things she wanted to do after that, and this carefree woman. And you know, when you smile now, because you're getting older, your face has these smile wrinkles that are just like her. It totally reminds me of her when you smile.
That's a good honor.
Yeah, it is. And I know her you told me her wish, her prayer. She asked God to let her live to see you and Roxanne married. Roxanne is your sister.
Yeah.
Because when she was diagnosed, you were single and in college. Was Roxanne in high school?
Freshman year of college.
Yeah. And so I guess the question I want to ask you is, how do you think your mom knew that she needed to stop doing the chemotherapy?
I think she knew because when she started seeing how ineffective it was and how miserable it made her, she said that one of those last visits with her oncology doctor, you know, she asked him the question, if I don't do it, how much time do I have? And he said 6 weeks. And she said, I could do 6 weeks. She just put her face to the wind. And she finished well. But, you know, looking back on it, I mean, everybody's circumstances are going to be a little bit different. It depends on what the kind of diagnosis you have. But the diagnosis she had, you know, stage 4, that's like stage 5 is stage 4 is the last stage before you're dead. So for her, they said there's this new stem cell, you know, treatment that they're doing. It has a 90% success rate over 5 years. So let's try it. She's like, yeah, let's give it a try. She was healthy already. She was strong and healthy. So she said, let's try it. And so they did it, and she got the all clear. So I know she was glad that she did that. And it was breast cancer. So, you know, she had a mastectomy, and they found a little bit in her lymph nodes. But, you know, they said it was all addressed. And then 2 years later, not 5, but 2 years later, they said it had come back in her lung. And that was hard because it, you know, metastasized. You know, breast cancer in your lung, it's an aggressive thing. And so there was different kinds of chemotherapy. So she did another big chemotherapy treatment. And then there was a kind she had to go in for like almost every week. I mean, it almost became like a household name, the name of this thing. And I can't remember what it is now, but she went in every week. And it was supposed to be simply a drug to keep it from metastasizing worse. But they couldn't get it out of the lungs. They could shrink it, but, she had some lung surgery where they took out part of her lung, but they could never get it, and it was just always slowly growing there. And
I don't remember that they had surgery to take part of it out of her lung. When was that?
When they did the biopsies to check on, what was going on in there. They removed part of her lung in the process. But
was that after I knew her?
Yeah.
Oh, wow, I don't even remember that.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yep, it was definitely after you knew her. Because, she was diagnosed in 94, died in 2003. And we got married in 2002. But I think that for her, there was also, different situations. Like, she wanted to see her kids married. She wanted to see us off. And she wanted to have a hand and a role in that. So that was a deep value for her. Mm-hmm. I think some of it was she was trying to get some things arranged financially, and she knew that there were stipulations with banks and insurances and all that stuff, that if she could just stay alive long enough, some of those contingencies would kick in. And so that she definitely had some of those goals in the process.
Yeah, that was a big concern of sheltering you guys from all the tax burdens, the death tax.
Oh my gosh, the government will just eat you alive because that's their job. And so she wanted to do whatever she could to shelter whatever God had given her to entrust to the family as part of that legacy, so we can continue to live and be generous with it. But it was so I know she had some of those incentives.
And her sheltering of you allowed us to start Solation.
That's right. If it hadn't been for her, we couldn't have started Solation and run that for so many years and touched so many lives. So it's just quite remarkable. Her tenacity and power and strength. But she outlived everybody in her oncology ward. Everybody who got diagnosed as she did were dead well before she was. So there was some level of her strength, something about God sustaining her, allowing certain treatments to be effective or at least semi-effective. Would she have done it differently? I don't know. It'd be an interesting conversation to have with her, how she would do it differently, knowing what she knows now. But I never sensed that after she said no to that last round, that she never said, oh man, I wish I had maybe... Now it's too late, but I kind of wish maybe we had tried a little bit longer. I think she knew she was tired, and she knew you can't fight this forever, so best to finish well. I mean, I wish my mom could have, held our children in her arms. That would have been great. But we even had that conversation with her, actually. She's like, no, you don't want to rush. It's all in God's timing. Don't do something like that for me. But it is an important question for anybody who's facing something, a mortal sickness, because 100 years ago, if you had cancer, you died. Throughout history, if people had cancer, nobody even knew it. And it's like, oh, they must have died pneumonia because their lung cancer filled their lungs. Or they just died randomly, we don't even know why. Or they just got sick one day and they were sick for a few weeks and then they just died.
Yeah, they'd call it like consumption or TB, or they just had different names for it, but you died faster.
They had no idea what cancer cells were and how this thing happened. I'm sure there's somebody in medical history who would be like, well, they did study it a little bit. They knew. I'm like, okay, whatever. But, but now that we know, and now we have modern medicine that can treat it or delay it, that creates a whole new area of ethical issues, but also of our just human experience. Because if you're supposed to die when you have cancer, and nature is taking you out with cancer, and you're prolonging that, you put yourself in a peculiar situation. Instead of dying by cancer, you're now dying by drugs. You lose all the side effects of like chemotherapy for this. You're losing your sensations in your fingertips, and all your hair, of course, is falling out. You're putting poison in your body, and your body's responding to the poison. Just tons of side effects, and it's a slow death. It's making the death long and drawn out for many people. And I do wonder if when you're diagnosed with something, depending on what your circumstances are, depending on what it is, and maybe it's best not to have treatment, just to be like, you know what, let nature run its course and keep me in as little pain as possible. Because I think that dying of natural causes sometimes is less painful than drawing it out with poison in your blood for a few more years, and just the horrible feeling that you have all the time. But that's modern medicine that's created that dilemma. And I think that's an important thing to acknowledge, that for all the technology that we have, it actually creates an anti-natural dilemma and gives us choices that we didn't have before.
It's very much like the upswing trend of Botox and all kinds of age-defying technologies.
Beauty enhancements.
Yes, it actually... It's a way of running away from death or running away from aging. And it prolongs the hard work that needs to be done to live your last years well.
Well, learn to own who you are in the time and space that you're in.
Yeah, so if women and men in their 20s are beginning to get these enhancements, they're having decades of years of practice running away from the experience of aging that God has permitted as a mercy to let us release this body that is slowly deteriorating.
Amen. The wrinkles in the mirror are perpetually God's reminding you that you are but dust, and the dust you will return. And the only power you have is resting in His hand.
Do you think it's possible people who rush into medical treatment, assuming that is the way or the only way, that they are not given permission, maybe, by their friends or their faith community or even their doctors to consider that chemotherapy isn't actually required?
Well, I think that's definitely a worthy conversation, because I can already hear all the messages that would play through somebody's head. If you're like, your church community would be like, you should do it, don't give up hope. And if you don't do it and you don't have hope, you don't have faith. You don't think God can heal you. You know those messages? Oh,
yeah. Race for the Cure, Hope, and all those, all the medical institutions.
Well, then the medical institutions, I would not have thought this 25 years ago, maybe because I was naive. But after 2020, and I realized how much of the medical institutions are driven by greed and parroting the powers that be, it makes you think like you're not going to get much encouragement to have a deeper understanding of your mortality and how to finish well, because there's too much money to be made by plugging you into a machine and injecting poison into your body. And yeah, they could prolong some things. They're not gods. Many of them think they are, but they're not gods. And so they have a big incentive to get you on the 7-digit program of medical treatment.
And it is in many ways, it's a delusion of hope, because your hope in a cure, race for the cure, all this stuff for the cure, that is most of the time it's just prolonging or delaying.
Sure, and I mean, there's no cure for death, period. They claim that they're trying to work on that. Of course they're trying to work on it. It's more terrifying to people who don't know God, but and they're always working on everything, of course. But yeah, there's no cure for that. So if cancer doesn't knock you out, something else will. It has to. Time just rolls along. It's a giant steamroller. It just comes along behind us and it just flattens us out. You know, George Washington, he died. Thomas Jefferson, he died. Napoleon, he died. St. Francis of Assisi, he died. The Apostle Paul died. Peter died. Moses died. Joshua died.
So did Abigail and Esther and Ruth.
Everybody think about all these lives that are larger than life. There was a moment in which they were laying on their beds and they breathed their last. Then you have somebody like Elijah that goes out in a chariot of fire, and you think, like, that's sweet. That's wicked cool. That's what the angels drive, chariots of fire.
It sounds hot.
Yeah, pretty toasty. But if you had marshmallows.
But if you're not a marshmallow and you're a human, I don't know if I want to climb on that chariot.
I bet it was cool. But then you have somebody like Jesus who says, because I live, you will live also. And you're like, what? Can you say that again? And he says, I am the resurrection and the life. He that believes in me will never die. Do you believe this? You're like, okay. I want to believe it. My mom said, when I asked her, "Where's the hope, Mom?"
You were asking her about what to do because she was up against her next option for treatment.
Yeah, are you hearing anything new? Because, when people like her in her position were always hearing about the experimental stuff, the stuff that's not even on the news yet. I go, well, where is the hope? Is there something else that's next? And she said, the hope, son, is in the resurrection. And that's it. That's it. That's the only thing that will heal this body. The great physician has only one surgery for us. It is that your body has to die so it can be remade into a life that cannot be corrupted. So, I say that to say, if cancer doesn't get you, something else will. Even if you go through the cancer treatment and you come out the other side free and clear, yay! It's all right. Time's still going to get you. Face your mortality. It's the only option you have.
But the thing is, at least this is what I keep hearing. People are told with a mortal disease that it's almost damaging to consider that it might not work. Almost like letting yourself face or contemplate death, meditating on death, accepting the possibility of death sooner than you expected is in some ways considered a cop-out from not being fully on board with the treatment.
Sure.
I've seen that
totally.
mentality.
It's the church slogans. You don't have faith. You don't have hope. You don't believe God can heal.
Yeah, exactly.
And I understand that, but I also think that most of the people who are advising you in that are people who have not faced their own mortality.
Yeah, that's
the monks understand this because it's one of the exercises you have to do in contemplation. It's part of the spiritual disciplines.
No, that is very true. I'm in this new school of business that I applied to and got accepted to, and there's a lot of soul work you have to do. It's not a Christian-based school, but they have a exercise called the Tibetan Death Meditation, and it's funny that it's called Tibetan because it's so laced with all the words of Jesus, but
they don't know any better, do they?
It's no. You can label it something Eastern so people think it's sexy, but the meditation it wasn't actually that eye-opening to me because you and I, and that's probably the legacy of your mom, is that we are regularly thinking through if this was the last week to live, if this is the last day to live, if this is the last year to live, how would we reconfigure our priorities? Again and again, we do that a lot. And I realize we are not typical people. A lot of people put off. They postpone.
Oh yeah, it'd be great if more people did it so we don't have to be atypical.
Yeah, that would be great. I suppose that's why.
But you're right. A lot of people do put it off. It is so much easier to doom scroll on Instagram. It's easier to think about the latest celebrity gossip. It's easier to just go out and binge eat ice cream or buy another thing. It's easier to think about a million other busy things we have to do to make ourselves feel important and worthwhile. All the while we're compensating for all of our inefficiencies, and we're definitely trying to avoid the idea of our mortality. And the other side of it is we live in such a positive, happy society that thinking about something like death is considered so morbid and so negative.
Yeah. That
you have to be a weirdo. Are you just like a gothy emo person that thinks about this? And I just think that's a major dysfunction to be in denial. You're just lying to yourself. It literally, that other date that goes on your tombstone, you have the first date already established, and you're waiting for the other date. And as they say, your lifetime is actually the dash between the dates. And that other date's coming. I sometimes sit down and I'm like, okay, what's that date going to be? Is it going to be 2034? Do I have 10 more years? Is it going to be 73? Am I gonna, become a centenary kind of person?
Centenary. I think it's
centenarian.
Septuagenarian. I don't know.
Whenever you say genarian, anything, it really sounds like you're on an oxygen tank. I don't know why it just does. But yeah, I sometimes think about that. What's that date going to be? What's it going to be like? And when's it going to meet me? I mean, every time I get on an airplane, I'm like, this could be the day. This could be the day. And the plane always lands safely. And I'm like, I don't know why I get annoyed by this. I should probably stop getting annoyed by the airplane because it never crashes. I keep waiting for it to crash.
Today, our friend M said that, Dale, you think about death a lot.
I know.
And then you were like, thank you. It's a total compliment. She was like, that's not what I meant.
I know.
She meant it as an accusation.
I know.
Or a concern.
The people I care about, thought about death a lot. That you think of the C.S. Lewis's and the Rich Mullins out there. It was one of those things that was kind of laced throughout. There's more to life than meets the eye. We are an everlasting splendor. We are supposed to outlast civilizations. We want to laugh until we fly.
And that is the way I see death, too. It's not that I like to think about my body decomposing or breaking down. I don't like to think about losing the connection I have with my body, with all the people I love.
Yeah.
I think
that's
about
a legitimate
death.
loss, too.
It
right?
is.
Real.
I think about death because, to me, it's a portal. It's the trailhead to go up to new heights. So I think about that trailhead a lot. I think about, how am I going to arrive there? Will I arrive with a backpack and good hiking shoes, or I'm going to arrive there bedraggled with blisters on my feet?
Because you weren't prepared, right?
Right, and I love being prepared. And I think about the parable of Jesus talking about the 12 virgins.
I think it's 10.
10, and 5 of them brought oil, and they were ready to greet the bridegroom, and they were waiting and ready. And then the other ones, they weren't ready. They didn't have the oil they needed. They had burnt it out. And I think of even in Christian culture, the excitement to be with Jesus after you die can sometimes erase the true grief that needs to happen, that you're going to say goodbye to your body. But there's also I think most people don't realize that death is, you're entering another way of growing, another way of knowing and being known. Mm-hmm. You're not entering a place that's entirely closed to you. It's not a mystery. The experience of death is a mystery, but the person I'm going to meet when I die is not a mystery.
It's like what C.S. Lewis says. He says, we live in the shadow lands now, walking towards the light. And he says, and everything we experience in this life is just but the title page of the book, and chapter 1 is about to begin.
The author who has given me the most curiosity and interest in life after death is George MacDonald. Mm. And the way he understands the intentionality of living with your eye on the way God will make all things new, but living that now all the way to your dying breath. And that's what inspired C.S. Lewis.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's super powerful. And that's what Dallas Willard taught over and over again. Divine conspiracy, renovation of the heart.
Yeah.
The eye towards the rule of God. It's not some sort of future thing. It's happening right now all around us, if we allow ourselves to be citizens of his kingdom. Which means, again, facing our mortality and becoming fearless people who accept our creatureliness and our limitations, so that we can be open to God and what he's up to and being his friend. Because it'd be great for your friend to be with you all the way through your last breath.
Yes.
And it's not like, oh, God came to get me. It was, I knew you were here with me. What's next?
Right. That's right.
I remember one time I had I think it was a dream. I dreamed that I died. And I woke up on the other side. And it seemed like, I don't know why, but it felt like I was in a floaty place. Like clouds or something like that. Stereotypical. But I was alone, and then I saw someone coming towards me. And I had this thought, I'm like, oh yeah, there's probably going to be one person coming towards me. And who's going to be the one to lead me in? Right? Mm-hmm. And you always think, oh, when I die, it's going to be my mom there, or it's going to be my dog that I liked, or it'll be my kids, or my family's going to be there. We're all going to greet each other, so glad you're here. But it wasn't any of that. All I saw was this figure coming towards me, and he was a man dressed in an English suit. And as he got closer, I realized it was C.S. Lewis. And the words out of his mouth were this: "It's better than I thought." Now, Lewis's vision of God is already better than I thought. And has been so worthy of exploring and understanding. But it's better than he thought. That was a great introduction to me. And of course, thinking that you're going to go see the king above all high kings, Aslan himself. And he will be rich and golden, and his breath warm. It would be like climbing upon his back. And he says, let's ride across these prairies. Let's ride over these hills. Like Susan and Lucy did in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. And it's the greatest thing that ever happened to them in Narnia, riding on the back of Aslan. That kind of vision, that is what God is like. And realizing that is really what Jesus is like. It makes the prospect of death seem so small. Like, I have just wonderful things to look forward to. Mm-hmm. In some ways, it's not dissimilar to coming to Jesus as your friend to begin with. And what is it that he asks you to give up? Deny yourself, take up your cross, and follow me. And he's asking you to do it in this world. How is it that you're doing it? You're giving up bad relationships in exchange for better ones. You're giving up bad family in exchange for a healthier one. You're giving up, bad eating and a myopic, obscure view of what you think your life is about for a better one. Giving up your selfishness for a life of fullness and openness and generosity. Death is the same thing. You're just giving up one more thing for him. And if you don't lose your life, you'll never find it. And that's the neat thing about God. He says, don't hold on too hard to this life. Like C.S. Lewis says, again, he says, aim for earth. And, how's it go? Hold on. Aim for heaven and you'll get earth thrown in. But if you aim for earth, you'll get neither. Mm-hmm. It's just a wonderful thing to have this incredible benefactor called Jesus, who is the author and giver of all good things. And gives you joy that can't be taken away by tyrants in this world. And he says, just keep giving it up to me. I'll take all the corruption. I'll take all the temporariness in your life. I'll take all the powerlessness, all that stuff. And I will give you something, and the very best thing that I can give you. Like, you mean riches? No. I can give you riches, yeah, but it's not the best thing I can give you. How about, can you give me, strength? And yeah, I can give you strength, but it's not the best thing I can give you. Like, well, what's the best thing you can give me? And he says, myself. And that's what God's up to. So, depending on what your prognosis is from the doctor, yeah, if it seems reasonable, do it. But don't put your hope in that. Because the hope is in the resurrection. And that literally is God giving of himself to you, because he likes to see you fully intact. And he will get it done. So that's what it always comes back to for me. What's this life really all about anyway? Is it prolonging my years? Or is it to be faithful to him with the time that he gave me? Mm-hmm. Like my mom would say, before she died, she says, everybody has an appointment with God and you're neither early nor late. So it's okay to let it go. He's got it. And 10,000 years from now, we're going to look back and be like, wow, I got to increase my life by 4 minutes by doing one more chemotherapy thing. Or I could trust God in the middle of it and say, it's time. I don't need to depend on the ways of men too much to give me hope. That's too much to bear, because it's always a false hope at the end of the day.
Yeah. I see that as the biggest issue, is the delusion of hope. It can actually create so much unhealth.
And despair.
Mm-hmm. And while I think I know, if you were out of the picture for some terrible reason and I was alone raising the boys, I think I would pray that I could last until they were married. I completely get why your mom did that.
Yeah.
I would probably do the same.
Yeah.
But if I had you here and I got cancer, I don't know how much chemotherapy I would do.
Yeah.
I don't.
Yeah.
I think it's a relief to me to know I'm married to someone who understands that you do have a choice.
Yeah.
It's not morbid, it's not giving up, and it's not faithless to choose to do less chemotherapy.
Yeah. You know, before we got married, I said to myself, what is one of my big criteria of finding a mate? And it was somebody that can raise my kids in the event that I died. So I'm glad I met you.
Thank you. Well, guys, Back Porch Conversations is what Dale and I do together publicly these days, but we also do things separately. Dale helps families everywhere access the Bible in a conversational way as he story tells the stories of Jesus, the stories of the Old Testament. You can listen to the whole book of Mark, Stories of Jesus for the Modern Family. Link is in the show notes. And I am I'm really an entrepreneur. I have an art business that I run, and I paint, and I sell my paintings and work with people to create custom paintings, and it gives me a lot of joy. If you'd like to take a class from us, you can check us out on solation.thinkific.com. And we look forward to any questions or feedback you might have for us. You can direct message us on the many social platforms we're on. For me, LinkedIn, X, Instagram, Facebook. And you can also just write us a personal email at hello@dalefincher.com. We'll catch you next time on the Back Porch.